There's a saying that says knowledge leads to God and life, therefore life. But lack of knowledge leads one away from God, and the most void of knowledge and wisdom are the ones that is what leads to one claiming that there is no God. Um, as a matter of fact, the best one who doesn't believe in God should say is, I don't know if there's a God or not. But to say plainly there is no God kind of shows that they know there's a God, but they're angry at the fact that there is a God. Is pretty much what that enlightens, because no person logical could actually say. Before I get into the topic, there's a guy named, I wrote a couple things down so I don't forget. There's a guy named Dean H. Kenyon. Uh, he wrote a book that was like heralded, like it was so popularized because he's a chemist, biochemist. He's in that field, spent many years in that field, and because remember, before you get to evolution, you have to get to life. If evolution is happening without God, right, or if life is evolving and there's no God, well, how did you even get that first life? And so obviously it would have arrived through chemical processes. So it's called chemical evolution. And Dean H. Kenyon, he hypothesized that there must be some chemical predestination that chemicals, or there must be some predestination that chemicals have that inevitably in some ways leads to life. So he wrote the book Biochemical Predestination. That was, and the book was like number one. He was, like I said, praised for that book. Received a lot of accolades. Then some time passed. Well, no, he didn't. He did, as he was writing the book. He noticed, when you writing something and your previous knowledge is like incriminating you because this is not the case. This is just, but because you're already dedicated to the task, you kind of like ignore it and finish it because you want to finish it. That's what he was going through, and he was playing about it. But after he published the book, and then afterwards, kind of like forgot about it a bit, and a student came to him, which I believe this student was sent by, and the student just asked him one question about how can proteins form in the absence of DNA or something to that effect. And that question just lingered in his head. And this is a man who already knows what chemicals can do. He's into this field, which is why it's amazing that he could even publish a book like Biochemical Predestination, because I'm going to show to you how just logic would have prevented him from writing that book. Because there's a phrase in the Bible that tells us, do not lose your power of reason. There are logical things that you shouldn't let anyone push you away from, no matter what they say. He allowed his power of reason to be lost, despite all the knowledge he had in the field, which is why his conscience was convicting him as he was writing the book. Okay. Now, so when the student gave him that question, that was lingered in his head, planted, and he spent the whole summer trying to refute the arguments, his own arguments, and the arguments brought up in previously before him, his predecessors, about how evolution or abiogenesis cannot happen, which is before the first life. So it's before evolution, right? So chemical evolution, this is. And he could find no rebuttal. So he gave up. It's not gave up, but like you have to give up if Superman can't fly, you have to give up eventually to the fact that Superman can't fly, right? So yeah, he could find no logical or reasonable or realistic or natural way that chemicals can lead to life. And so he wrote a follow-up book, completely obliterating what he wrote in his previous book of biochemical predestination. He obliterated all the things he wrote in that book. And when he wrote the more logical book, refuting his old book, he was criticized and pushed down. And well, obviously, it's the devil's world. Whatever is perpetuated in the devil's world is a lie. The truth is what's hidden. Now, why do I mention do not lose your power of reason? The reason why Dean H. Kenyon shouldn't have even wrote biochemical predestination in the first place is because, and I mentioned this in my last video, We all know, and we don't even have college degrees in this field of chemistry, but this is how simple it is, which is why you should, and you're going to see why he should have never wrote this book in the first place. This is how simple it is. The chemicals in the world, you can bake a cake. This was in my previous video. You can bake a cake. You can bake bread. You can use hydrogen, sulfur, ammonia. You can use all separate water, mix whatever elements you want to try to make something, right? The more simple we can do, if we're not chemists, is we can bake a cake. We're chemists in that sense, but we can't do the more absurd things that people can do, right? But we can bake a cake. That's chemistry. What they do with the chemistry is literally no different than you baking a cake. It's the same thing. So now try to imagine a world where a cake can be baked through natural processes, or something you can make in the water. But if you make it in the water, understand that it's the same chemistry that you are using to bake a cake. Do you know how impossible it would be for you to bake a cake or make something in water? Why can't you bake a cake in water? Because water will break it down, right? Water literally breaks down everything. Water literally breaks down everything. But it's the thing. Abiogenesis, everybody knows. Let me put it in plainer terms. The chemicals that will come together to make life, everybody knows it can't. Everyone in the science field who believes in this knows it can't happen on land because because molecules can't get up and walk and come together. So that's why they say the primordial soup. It must have happened in water. But the paradox, which is called the water paradox, is water will break down the very same compounds that you're claiming would bring the compounds together. So are you beginning to see the absurdity of D&H Kenyon's first book? Apart from the fact that water breaks things down, so there is no billions of years, the moment anything forms, it will be broken down in the moment, if not over, let's give it even years. Still not enough time. People. But that cake, even if, let's say, there is no limitations or there's no hydrolysis, there's no breaking down, there's no diluting, right? And there's no, forget about the terms. In what world would a cake be baked? Now, why is it inconceivable that natural processes can bake a cake? Even if the temperature is there, the oven is there, and there's right temperature, right ingredients, all the things are there. Why is it inconceivable? One, because a cake is too complex. There's too much, not information, but the amount of steps to bake a cake. There is no way, even if it ever starts on that process, it can't continue because you will never get there. You will never get a cake through natural processes, right? But a cake, the complexity of a cake is billions, this is no exaggeration, is billions of light years simpler than the most simple living cell. But yet, somehow, chemicals came together to make a cell, but yet it can't bake a cake. And you would say, but baking a cake is kind of difficult. You have to put it in a... No. Yeah, you have to put it in an oven. You have to bake it. It is far more simple than a living cell. So, again, D&H Kenyon's foolishness in writing biochemical predestination is just not going to happen. But now, there are tons of videos showing you don't need those videos. But if your mind is playing games on you, watch those videos where they tell you, and I'm gonna post in the future a video of the leading chemist. Okay, no one compares to him. Okay, he's at the top of his field. He tells you it cannot happen. Don't let them fool you. Okay, so now let me get to the topic of the video. If by some means, some mysterious, magical means, the chemicals come together mind you, the chemicals are there, but there are myriads of other chemicals and compounds which will defile this compound. So you will never even get started. And life is already proven, okay, that the organism, the first cell, had to be in pristine, pure amount of, it had to have the pure compounds, undefiled, completely undefiled, in order for it to live. How do you get that in a dirty nature? It's unnatural. It's inconceivable how you can. That's why the H. Kenyon said it's inconceivable how it can happen. It can't happen. Far more, if billions of light years more complex than a cake, but yet you can't conceive a cake being baked through natural processes. But you can conceive a cell being. People, it's up. Those who deny God's existence, they have no excuse. It's utter nonsense. Like one biologist said, is void of any form of common sense. People, the more educated they get in their field, the more they realize the absurdity of the notion of evolution and biochemical evolution or abiogenesis. But like, let's ignore that and let's be stupid and say it can happen. Okay, fine. All the chemicals come together, doing their magic. They're not breaking down through hydrolysis. Oxygen isn't breaking it down. Even if there isn't oxygen, there's ammonia. Ammonia is even more detrimental to it. It's not breaking it down. Where it's defying all the logics. It's gathering energy from something, right? Gathering energy from something, but all of a sudden, when it becomes that something, now it needs energy from food to power it. But before it had food, it didn't need something to power it, and it was just magically becoming more complex, defying the laws of thermodynamics and perpetual motion machine, just constantly building itself through billions of years nonstop. And it needs to be continuous, because if it stops, it's going to decay. But no, it doesn't stop. Everything bam, 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 right? Natural processes, no purpose, no direction, no guide. And then you arrive, because it's in perpetual motion, you arrive at the first cell, right? And it's in a vesicle. Now it's a cell, and the very same environment that produced it, that you claim produced it, it now has to shield itself from that very same environment that produced it. Because that now, for some reason, it wasn't detrimental to it while it was being made, but now that it's made, it's so detrimental to the environment is so detrimental to the cell that it needs a membrane to protect itself from the environment that produced it. Okay, so we're defying all logic. We're throwing our power of reason out of the window and saying, yeah, that's what happened, because there is no God. I don't care what you say. There is no God, and that's how it came about. And so it's a perpetual motion machine, right? So now it's alive. It's alive. Without purpose, without an aim, without a goal, it's alive, right? Stay with me here. If nature could produce life, what you would have is a life that is alive, but it's not really alive. Because what it is something that's alive, but it has no purpose. It has no goal. It has no drive to do anything, right? Because molecules have no goal, have no drive, have no purpose. They're just things. When you bake a cake, it has no purpose. It has no drive. But the cake arrived somehow. The molecules came together and made a cell somehow. But that cake, that cell, is not alive because it's made up of molecules that themselves are not alive. So you have this living thing, but soon it's going to die because it has no motivation to preserve this life that it's come to acquire, because it got there without any purpose. In order for that thing to have a drive, a goal, a purpose, let me look for food to preserve myself. In order for it to have that, it would need something else that comes outside of what molecules can give it. It would need a spirit. It would need a soul. It would need something. That something far supersedes what the molecules can give it. So we have this molecule. It's like a machine, right? Things come together and a machine starts to move. You would say it's alive because it's moving, right? Where is it getting its energy? I don't know. It's just moving. Okay, fine. It's moving. You would say the sun. The laws of thermodynamics refute that, but we're playing stupid. It's moving. But okay, it's alive in that sense, But a machine, if it has energy, can continue moving. Perpetual motion machines, no one can build one. So much so that they've stopped giving grants to people to try to build one because it can't happen. We know enough about the laws of physics that it just can't happen. So everybody has stopped. They've given up because it can't happen. Okay, we know enough to know it can't happen. We know enough to know that this can't happen either. But we're playing stupid and saying it can happen. Well, and saying it's in perpetual motion. Okay, fine, it's in perpetual motion like a machine. But the machine that's in perpetual motion doesn't have a motivation to go and preserve itself to continue being a machine. The molecules that have come together to make this machine don't have a purpose or goal to preserve its movement. What is it? Why would it even try to preserve it? It has no motivation to do anything. So if nature could produce life, that's what life would be. It would be producing a bunch of lives, but those lives will also be dying soon afterwards because they would have no spirit, no motivation, no goal, no drive to preserve the life that they've come to have because they don't even know that they have a life to preserve. They don't even know that this life that they've come to have is so special. Let me preserve it. They don't know that. They're alive. Boo-hoo. Big deal. I'm going to die too. Yeah. You became alive and you died. It's no different than a baby that is born and then it dies. It doesn't know that it's alive. It doesn't care. It needs to be taken care of in order for it to continue being alive. Otherwise, it'll die. Now, a baby is much more advanced than a bacteria. But why does the bacteria know to do something? Because it was made to do something and it was made to take care of itself. Why does a baby not know to take care of itself? Because it has parents to take care of it because that's the way it was designed. But when molecules come together to make a life, if it's not made by God, if it's not made by higher intelligence, if it's made by just molecules, then it would be no different than a baby that's been made because they have no conscience, they have no motivation, they have no goal, they have no purpose. So even if we defy all reason and throw out all logic and say that nature could create life, that is what you would have. Is that. So that you will never even get above the level of bacteria. Because it'll just be a bunch of bacteria that's alive but have no conscience, no drive, and they'll just be dying and dying and dying and dying, and that's what you will always have. You will never get anything more complex than a bacteria. But that's not what we see in life. Okay? So I hope you guys understand my drift. So again, do not lose your power of reason. Baking a cake is the same chemistry, but a cake will not preserve itself alive. It'll just decay. So what you will be having is a bunch of cakes that will be popping up, but disintegrating soon afterwards. But if it's disintegrating even after it's become a cake, then how did it become a cake? How did it defy the laws and not disintegrate before it became a cake? If a cell needs to go through trillions, literally trillions of complex biological systems and mechanisms and machinery and information to preserve itself alive against the elements of nature, so that's how detrimental nature is to it, then how did it defy those laws when it didn't have those systems in place to get to where it was, to where it would have the systems in place to protect it from the environment that you claim produced it? Can fire produce wood? No. So if there's wood that's in fire, and naturally wood is supposed to be burned by fire, but fire is being preserved alive in wood and doing all sorts of things in wood, but eventually it does get burned. Eventually we do die, but it's able to go through chemical reactions to preserve itself alive in fire. Nature tells you that that's unnatural. And it's even more absurd to claim that the fire is what produced the wood. Oh my goodness, people. Yeah, so I'm gonna leave it at that. Do not lose your power of reason and keep investigating these things and strengthen your faith in the Almighty, and don't let the devil deceive you. There is a spirit world, people. There is a spirit world. You are more than flesh. You are more than flesh. So that's what gives you your drive. All right, I'm gonna leave it at that. Peace.